Do you want some water or anything?
So like just going to wait for the signal for the live stream to be okay. Okay. Sure. We'll tell you. Great, thanks. All right.
Good afternoon. I'm here to talk about an approach that we've developed at Orchid to privacy using Ethereum. So I've been doing this tech thing for a while, and when I first got into it, it was very exciting. The internet was just this place where there's a lot of ability for freedom of expression, freedom of just kind of finding people like you, which at the time when I was at Cambridge, which was this funny little town in the middle of England, just wasn't, it wasn't the same thing. Just finding people who were into the same stuff as you, whether it was the kind of research I was doing, the internet suddenly opened that up in a very exciting way. But now, when you use the internet, and I'm sure you're all very familiar with this idea, it's risky. You are making implicit or explicit trades of your information, of your identity, in return for convenience, in return for fun, in return for things that are actually essential to your life, and you feel like you don't really have a choice but to make that trade. This is both corporations and states. So the situation that happened a couple of years ago with Facebook and poor old Mark ending up in front of the Senate. And then last year, when they tried to get into the crypto space with Libra, is one example of the trade that's happening and people are becoming very aware of in corporations. And then, in terms of countries, we're very fortunate, really, in the West, in the kind of countries we live in, most of us live in, that we're not under direct, like super heavy surveillance. There is definitely a lot of leaks, and the previous talk has outlined some of these things. But the kind of surveillance and censorship that's happening in many countries right now would just be unthinkable to most of us. And you don't have to go very far. It's a little bit difficult to get on a plane to China right now, but get on a plane to China and try using the websites that you're used to using, and you'll find that it's a very different world. And so really what's happened is the tech that was there to make our lives easier and allow us to explore and get access to information and share it has actually made the surveillance and the censorship much easier also. So current news, the very tragic events that are happening globally right now with COVID-19 has really shone a spotlight on what's happening globally, both around censorship and surveillance. The outbreak in China was detected before the Chinese New Year. People were aware of it, but information was censored to the extent that most people had no idea that something like this was happening. And so everyone traveled. It's the largest migration every year globally. And I think we can now see the effects of that situation unfolding globally. In terms of surveillance, there's now an app being widely used amongst citizens in China, and it has a green or a red sticker, a QR code on here. And if it's green, you're allowed to move around. If it's red, you're not. So it's like William Gibson has this expression that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. And this sounds like something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie that we'd all be watching and saying, this is just crazy, like it's like a Black Mirror episode, this isn't going to happen in the world, but it's happening right now. It's happening right now, and it's affecting millions and millions of people. So the idea that what you're using is free has a catch, and the catch is that you're the product. Every single one of you is the product that's making these companies billions of dollars every year. And that's a trade that you're making every day, whether by choice, whether you're aware of that trade, which I'm sure many of the audience are, or whether you're unaware of that choice, which a lot of people are. And this business model has now been termed surveillance capitalism. And our idea really is, what if we could turn this business model from surveillance capitalism into kind of, I guess, privacy capitalism? People are now getting very conscious of what's happening. So the idea that you can kind of keep pulling the wool over people's eyes is starting to change. So what if we could break this up? So we're in the business of decentralizing things. Everyone's here is like very excited about, let's decentralize everything, decentralize all the things. So what are we decentralizing here? So let's take a look back into some killer apps that we've had in the space. Bitcoin is really the first killer app. And everyone's like, what is the killer app of Bitcoin? I'm like, well, the answer is, it's Bitcoin. Decentralization is about breaking central points of control. The central points of control that Bitcoin broke were nation states and banks. It allowed you to have a place that you could store your wealth without the oversight, without the control of someone who could just lean into your account and take it away from you one day. With Ethereum, the centralized point of control was really the old boys club of Silicon Valley, the VCs and the angels who decide when they anoint a company and say, this is the new thing, we're going to invest into this. Instead, Ethereum enabled us to have a crazy idea. Our company was one of those crazy ideas. And get that funding from a global population who then have a stake in that ecosystem. So this idea of what could we do differently is very important to the way we think about things at Orchid. One way, and it's not a panacea for all the things I've talked about, but one way you can protect your privacy online is using a VPN. But there are pretty big challenges with existing VPNs. One way to think about a VPN is it's a paid man-in-the-middle attack. So you're paying somebody to take your data and transmit it and return to you the data you were looking for. And as long as you trust the person in the middle, this sounds familiar, right? Then everything's fine. The other problem with VPNs is that they're just not transparent. There's really no open source frameworks for building VPNs on your own. And if they are, they're kind of complicated to use. The approaches that are more open are not incentivized. So these are kind of the approaches that we took when we designed Orchid. The other thing that we figured out is that, and we had a reference to CryptoKitties in the previous talk, is that if you guys remember when CryptoKitties came along and also the different ICO booms, it kind of shut Ethereum down. Things just got really slow, gas costs went up. Everyone's like, well, my goodness, which ICO is happening today, or what CryptoKitty craze is happening today? So with Orchid, what we're doing is we're paying node providers as part of this distributed VPN network. So if you think about the speed and the scale at which we need to do that on a data level, this starts to become like quite a challenging problem to do this on a public blockchain like Ethereum. So the technique we developed is it's very interesting, and it has actually some potentially kind of tangential applications outside of bandwidth, is what we call probabilistic nanopayments. And the idea is that instead of paying each of the node providers in the network an on-chain payment for a small amount, we send them a ticket. And that ticket, most of the time, is worth nothing. And every so often, it's worth a lot, such that the expected value over a period of time is the same as if we actually paid you on-chain. And this enables us to do payments on a data networking level. Every single packet that we send has a payment associated with it. We also add in multiple hops. There are a couple of VPNs who have a technology they call double VPNs, or it's like 2 hops. The problem with this approach is that it's within the same VPN company. So if you're using a well-known VPN and you're using 2 hops, it's still done within that VPN company. So if you don't trust the VPN company, it's not helping you to have these multiple hops. In our architecture, different providers can be hopped between, And the advantage of this is it allows you to have IP anonymity across the network. In the end, what we're trying to do here, and we definitely get a lot of questions about, is this something that should exist? But we're trying to give you the VPN you expected. We're trying to give you one that doesn't log data and gives you the anonymity that you were paying for. We are, of course, also very supportive of a number of other projects within the space. I was a seed investor in Zcash in the early days, and we're big fans of Starkware and some of the other companies like Aztec in the space that are looking at privacy. We are here in Paris. There's a couple of my team members in the back there. Look for us in the big purple hoodies. And our booth is just behind the stage and right out there. I'm available all day for questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other question or anything to ask? Any? You?
Thank you for the talk. I was wondering, what do you think about and how would it be possible to implement such a system like privacy by design, in the sense that more than having the citizen having to protect himself by default, we can ensure some privacy of data and maybe have more a permission asking, like, rather it's companies or government, they will have to actually ask for the data they need more than.
Yeah, I think if I can get the question, I think you're talking about the idea of decentralized identities and
Yes.
sort of owning your own data.
Indeed.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is we are a company that is focused on privacy tools. So this is essentially our first tool. We launched it in December. And it's live. This isn't. We've been working on it for the last 3 years. We definitely have ambitions in other areas, such as distributed identity. We're working on things like firewalls for your phone. There's a whole suite of things. This is just kind of the base layer that gives you the IP anonymity, and then you can ideally move up from there. But I think this is a great point.
Does anyone knows? Yeah, there we go.
So how do you assure that the VPN doesn't store any data?
So if you're using just a single hop, so like kind of like a standard VPN in our architecture, which you can, we can give you the iOS or the Android app and show you how to use it right now. Then it is similar to using a standard VPN as you're suggesting. If you use multiple hops, then the person at the end, who's really the one who has access to the website that's being requested, doesn't know what your IP address information is. So logging you at that point doesn't have any effect. It's not helpful for them. Yeah, it's an onion rounding approach is the technique, yeah. And you can add in multiple hops along the way. We've also done a lot of adversarial attack modeling because obviously if you're using a public blockchain like we are, then you have to start thinking through what are the source of the funds and how do you model those things. So we've got a lot of thinking around that. There are kind of best practices guides to how to use it, and in our future applications we'll be putting those things in by default so that you'll have easier approaches to do that. This guy, taking all the photos.
So the work you've been doing and the product you're building is absolutely paramount. Like I want to try it.
Well, you can.
It's not available in my country on the Google Play thing. So first question, when will it be available? And
what's your country?
France.
France. Come talk to us afterwards.
I'll do. And how can I become a service provider? Can I become a node to relay the hops?
Come talk to us afterwards. We have an interesting approach for that too. So the interesting thing about that's kind of like a whole talk in itself. What we figured out is that even though payments are trustless and so on in blockchain, service provision is not trustless. So if you're potentially logging me or potentially doing JavaScript injection and kind of all these kind of issues, right? So, and this is the advantage of it is the one advantage significantly of integrating the networking into the browser, as is done by some other projects. So our approach to this is to create trust networks within ORCID. So you can specify essentially who is the curator of a specific trust network. And then you can become part of that network and be a node provider within it. What we've done initially when we launched is we partnered with, I think, 6 or 7 different, I think it's about 7 now, VPN providers. So we went through and checked companies like PAA, Liquid, Bole, and we looked and talked to them and said, okay, we need to know that you guys are good people. We need to know that you're doing things that we believe in. And it's been interesting partnering with VPN companies when we are also potentially disruptive to it. But the space is so fragmented that this kind of approach actually makes a lot of sense. Here's another question.
Sorry, one more question. Is there an application of ORCID for, say, protecting nodes that would be validating in Ethereum 2 or another proof of stake blockchain that would require to hide the IP of their nodes or something?
That's a great idea. Let's talk about that. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Anyone? Yeah.
One more question here.
What stops a government like China from making it illegal to run or use ORCID? And doesn't that sort of make some fragility to what you're doing?
Or a government like the United States. Yes, I agree, or France. In recent weeks, China has cracked down on VPNs recently because they are concerned about the spread of information, or apparently concerned about the spread of information from outside China into China about what's happening with COVID-19 or how people are thinking about it. So yeah, we're not in the business of setting policy or regulations. Like I said, we're trying to give you the VPN you expected. If some government decides that all VPNs are illegal, then obviously we'll be challenged with launching into that country. And that is a challenge right now in terms of marketing into China or Russia or Turkey.
Do you think that's a solvable problem or just the nature of power?
I think I would actually look more to Apple and Google in terms of the control structures there, because they're the ones that the government can lean on and decide that, I mean, the Apple App Store in China, you cannot get a lot of VPNs, or if any. And so people come in and sideload APKs on Android. In a country like that, you're always going to have people who are more highly motivated or are sort of traveling internationally back and forth and therefore have access to that. And you can only hope that those things end up spreading the word and that information. Something I've realized is that you don't always need every single person in a country to have access to information. Maybe you need a few people who can then spread that information, hopefully in the right way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I recently also launched a little mailing list, plug in my own mailing list here if you want to get my sort of more recent thoughts on this on a daily, well, on about a weekly basis, I'd say. This is my Substack link. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask any other question? All right, then thank you very much. Let's give a big round of applause. And massive as well.